the listening public, welcome and welcome to the officials of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. And may I take this opportunity to wish you all a happy and bright and resilient 2021. My name is Bridget Mary Anisette George, and I am the chairman of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. The Committee on Public Administration and Appropriations, the PAAC, has the mandate to consider and report to the Houses on A, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies to ensure that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs and keeps Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And C, the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of this meeting is to examine the responses of the ministry with regard to the COVID-19 pandemic in Trinidad and Tobago. The committee intends to attain the following: the expenditure related to the cost and distribution of COVID-19 support measures, and the challenges faced by the ministry with regard to the rollout of COVID-19 related initiatives and the solution to these challenges. The role of the committee is to assist the stakeholders in achieving the efficient delivery of services while ensuring that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. This meeting is being broadcast live on Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM and Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Participants are advised that their microphones should remain muted until recognized by the chair. I now take this opportunity to invite the representatives of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services to introduce themselves. And thereafter, I will ask the members of the committee to introduce themselves. So I turn the mic over to the Acting Permanent Secretary.
Good afternoon all. I am Sheila Citron, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Social Development and Family Services.
Good afternoon all. My name is Vijay Gangapasad, Acting Deputy PS in the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services.
Good afternoon all. Esther Pilgrim-Soames, Director of Finance and Accounts.
Good afternoon all. Patricia De Leon Henry, National Director, National Social Development Program.
Thank you very much, and may I ask the members of the committee to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon all. Yukima Beth Elmi, Government Senator.
Good afternoon everyone. Amrita Devanarayan, Member.
Good afternoon everyone. Lisa Morris-Schuler, Member of Parliament for W. O'Mara.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ayana Webster Roy, Member.
Good afternoon, everyone. Pastor Lackner, Minister in the Ministry of Public Administration.
Dr.
Digital Transformation.
Good afternoon, Clarence Rambarat, Member.
Good afternoon, Stephen McCrashy, Member.
And I think, Dr. Bodo, you are the only one left.
Yes. Good afternoon.
may I then therefore ask Member Mark to introduce himself? Okay, so that Member Mark, could you kindly introduce yourself?
Yes. Good afternoon, all. Are you hearing me? Yes, good afternoon, all. Wade Mark, member.
And Dr. Bodo, if you could hear me, I invite you to introduce yourself. Okay, so it appears we may be having a little technical difficulty. So the last member of the committee is Dr. Lakram Bodo, who is the vice chair of this committee. I thank you all. I therefore at this stage will invite the acting permanent secretary to make an opening statement if she so wishes. Madam Acting PS.
Yes, Chair, thanks. Chairman, other members of the committee, good afternoon once again. I would like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to say a few words. Within the past several months, the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services underwent significant changes in its mandate. Notwithstanding, my ministry continues to be the lead ministry charged with the responsibility of providing social protection to the most vulnerable citizens of our country. My ministry is cognizant of the consequences of the prevailing economic conditions and other challenges, especially the impact of COVID-19 on those in society who are considered as the less fortunate. The devastating impact of this virus, as we have seen across the world, and more specifically here at home, presents an additional and daunting challenge for those already deemed poor and vulnerable. It is for this reason that my ministry is grateful to have been invited to attend and contribute to today's inquiry into the response of public authorities to the spread of COVID-19 in Trinidad and Tobago, so as to meaningfully contribute to the desired outcomes for those persons who have come to depend on us. It is hoped that this meeting will help to bring about clarity where there may be some areas of uncertainty to responses which we have submitted. We look forward to assisting the committee in its inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam PS. And I would like to kick off the conversation by saying that we have received your submission, and I think it's laudable that your committee led this initiative to really assist our several citizens who were considered the vulnerable citizens affected by the impact of this COVID-19. Now, I observed in your opening statement, you spoke about significant changes to the mandate of your ministry. And I would really be interested for you to develop that somewhat, to tell us what were the significant changes to your mandate that you experienced in the last several months.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The significant changes I referred to relate to the ministry's main initiative as the disbursement of grants to the citizens who were vulnerable. All the various forms of grants that we did, the entire mission of the ministry during the past several months concentrated on that initiative.
Okay, because your ministry as it is, as my understanding, is that you are involved in distributing grants in any event. But the significant change that you referred to would be COVID-19 specific grants, yes?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, all right. So to lead off the conversation, we've seen your breakdown in your submission with respect to the various grants which was specific to COVID-19. And you've listed food support hampers, food vouchers, income support, rental assistance. And this would be the expenditure up to the 30th of November 2020, at a figure of $351,928,855. Yes? And Madam Pierce, I think you need to unmute.
Yes, Chair.
The two questions I wanted to ask is, would this figure that you've had here as a total, would that have changed between the 30th of November and today?
Yes, it would, in that we do have a number of grants that are already processed, but we are waiting releases from the Ministry of Finance to pay those grants.
Okay, so if I understand it, is that this total figure, what does this total figure represent? Just grants that have been processed?
Yes, grants that have been processed and paid to date.
All right, so those are grants that have been processed and paid. Yes?
Yes.
And under, let's take, for example, under food support.
Yes.
Where you have $17,144,100. What does this figure represent?
Okay, this figure represents persons who were on our database as food recipients, apart from COVID. Our general clients who are in receipt of food payments, they were given a top up.
All right, so this represents.
Yes.
Yes, this represents payments to persons on your database.
Yes, our normal routine recipients.
Okay, these are. And this $17 million plus,
yes,
these are monies that have already been processed and paid, or is this the allocation for that purpose?
No, these were monies that have already been paid.
These are monies already been paid. And would I be correct in saying that all of these figures, so you have food and income support, retrenched, terminated, income reduced for an initial period not exceeding 3 months, where you have expenditure $465,120. Are these monies processed and paid?
Yes, they are monies processed and paid.
All right, so if that is the case, the $351,928,885, which is the total, I think, according to what you've shown, under expenditure.
Yes.
I think I understood you to say that this expenditure would have changed.
It will increase.
Okay, so as of the 30th of November, 2020, this total of $351,928,885 is monies that have been processed and paid under these various grants.
Yes.
Okay.
That's true.
So might I ask if this in fact adds up to $351,928,885?
It should, yes. Yes. Yes, it does add up to that.
Yes, it does add up to that. Okay, so let me ask you another question. In terms of the expenditure under all of these grants that you have listed in the table, is there a cap on those expenditures so that you will know what the total expenditure should be or the total allocation is?
Well, the expenditure is based on applications received. So there's no cap. Once the process was open for the intake of applications, we would have received applications and processed.
Okay, so there is no cap, and therefore once somebody qualified under your various heads,
yes,
you paid whatever the specified sum was.
Yes, that is true.
So that as we speak, you have no idea with respect to what this total will be.
We do have an idea in terms of what is processed right now and awaiting releases for payments. So we have an additional 23 million there.
You have an additional 23 million processed and awaiting payment.
Payment, yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to just stop at this time because I want to invite Member Diona Ryan, because I believe she would have a question based on the computation of these figures.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon again to everyone. Madam PS, I ran a quick calculation on the figures that you have provided on table 1. And based on my computation, the figure actually adds up to $509 million. Could you verify that the sum is indeed $351.9 million, or whether it is $509 million in total? And also, the additional 23 million, how come is that additional 23 million does it still fall within the 3 months of support that was provided due to COVID-19, or is this in excess of the 3 months that was communicated to the public by the authorities?
Okay, in fact, it is for the first 3 months. What happened is we have new applications. So each application that comes in is a new application. No one got payments in excess of 3 months.
Okay, so it is a continuation of processing of payments since the onset of the pandemic for that March, April, May period.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes, because applications keep coming in.
Okay, and just to reiterate, there is no limit in terms of the amount of applications, no dollar value limit in terms of the amount of applications that you all are processing and approving once persons are deemed eligible.
No, there was no limit as per the cabinet minute, and we were just processing. Once applications come in and they were approved, they satisfied the criteria for payment, they were paid, or they are lined up for payment. However, we have stopped the intake of applications.
Okay, so these are applications that would have been received during what period?
March 20 until December the 4th, 2020. So we still have applications that are not yet processed as well.
Okay. All right, and could you verify the total figure for me on table 1, please?
Okay, just give me 1 second. Let me just run my calculator.
Good afternoon. I'm really trying to get my hand up to provide some clarity as it regards to table 1. I'm sorry.
Okay, so
have some technical difficulty.
Yes, just 1 minute, Mr. Ganga Prasad, and therefore, Madam PS. At this stage, I will just invite Mr. Ganga Prasad because it appears that he is in a position, and this is the Deputy PS, in a position to assist with the question asked by Member Diona Ryan, and this is with respect to the computation of the figures. Yes?
That's correct. Yeah, and I must apologize. The table has an additional 157,019. The second to last row that marks income support to retrenched, terminated, and income reduced. That column there actually should not be there. It is picked up underneath the total income for that was picked up on top where you see 237,465,000. You are seeing, are you seeing that? That 237, the 237,465,000 should have been broken down with food, 74,850,000. That should have been broken down further. Sorry, food 80,445,870, and income 157,019,250. That is what came up to the 237,465. That you would notice that it was amalgamated food and income support. And in error, it was included again on top. So the expenditure really was 351,928,885. That 157 in the second to last column, sorry, the third to last column is a repeat of what is in under food support and included in the 237 million.
Okay, so Mr. Ganga Prasad, if I get you correctly, what you're saying is the question raised by Member Dunarine, there's an admission that there's been a double counting.
Yes, that's correct.
The double counting is of $157,019,250.
That's correct.
Yes, and in fact, the grant, the intervention, which is described as food and income support to retrench terminated income reduced for an initial period not exceeding 3 months. There is a total figure of $237,465,120. That is broken down into the two components. One is food and one is income.
That's correct. The food component of that is 80,445,870. And yes, the income component is 157,019,250.
So that in effect, what you are submitting is that the total of $351,928,885 as of November 30th, 2020 is a correct figure.
That's correct.
Okay. I just wanted to, maybe between you, Mr. Ganga Prasad, and the acting PS, if you could give some clarification, because this says for a period not exceeding 3 months. And I am a bit confused by the discussion thus far, because on the one hand, I get the impression that the 3 months was fixed. On the other hand, I'm understanding, which should have been, I think, April, May, June, or March, April, May, but fixed at 3 months, which is gone. But I seem to be understanding from the discussion that any time prior to the 4th of December, one could have applied for these grants and get them coming forward for a 3-month period, so that you could have applied on the 1st of December, 2020, and therefore qualified to get a grant for December, January, February 2021. December 2020, January, February 2021. Is that so?
Okay.
So,
sorry. Okay. Vijay, if you want to go ahead, I would.
Right. So, yeah, the clarity is that we had an effective date of 1st of March 2020 for the payment of our grant. The grant per se would be paid for a period of 3 months. Whenever you applied for the grant, it would be paid for a period of 3 months. It did not, we did not fix to a period, for instance, April, May, and June. If you applied for the grant any time before, as you indicated, the 4th of December, and payment is made, it would be made for a period of 3 months. a 3-month period, you would receive the support for a 3-month period.
Okay, thank you very much. Member Bodo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome again to PS, and just to thank you for the great job that you've been doing through very difficult times. I just wanted to tie my question into table 1 again, and to ask if you would be in a position for each of the categories listed. Now we have the totals, but we don't have the number of beneficiaries. So whether you're in a position to provide that information now, or if not, in writing. So that's my first issue.
Yes, we are in a position and we will provide those figures in writing.
Okay, and the second point, Madam PS, is that as a member of Parliament, and I'm sure all members of Parliament, we are always concerned, and especially it has become more obvious and acute in this time, in terms of how we service our constituents. Now, we have been engaged by the ministry with regards to some of these distributions and so on. But my concern is that although the state is providing a certain amount, as MPs, we try to source other resources and so on. But my concern would be that I don't know who has benefited. Many times I will not know who has received benefits and so on. So I just wanted to make a suggestion for consideration as to whether the ministry can look at implementing a mechanism whereby those persons who have benefited, whether that can be broken down by constituency and forwarded to MPs, so that we're in a better position when we are approached by constituents and know, okay, listen, constituent A, B, C, and D, C have received some relief, and therefore we can direct those resources to others who might be in need. I'm not sure if you understand the point I'm making there, Madam PS, and I would value your comments on this.
Okay, what happened is that our database is not catered in such a way that we have constituency. We do have addresses of persons, but not by constituents.
Right, and I agree, but is it something that you feel might be useful, bearing in mind the point I just made?
Yes, I agree that it would be useful, and we are in the process of implementing a new database or a new management system, and we would take that. We are considering that into account, actually.
Okay, thank you, Madam PS. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so I just want to go back, Madam PS, to the grant you spoke about, which is the additional support to existing beneficiaries of food support, which up to the 30th of November was amounted to some 17 million. Could you say how many people were beneficiaries under this grant?
Yes, Chair. In terms of persons, it's 14,737 persons. And it was a one-off payment in that the top-up was, it was for 3 months, but we actually gave them, the payment was made in a one-time payment to those persons.
So is that the same 510 figure?
No.
Sorry,
it depended on the existing, I told you this related to existing clients of ours. So yes, persons who were with a family of maybe 1 or 2 household members would have gotten an additional $150 per month for 3 months. Persons with up to 5 members in the household would have gotten an additional $300 per month for 3 months. And above that would have gotten $450 per month for 3 months.
Okay. Did this 14,000 plus people represent all the persons on your client base, or is this just part of the persons on your client base?
So they were all the persons who were in receipt of food grants on our database at the point in time.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Ganga Prasad, I saw your hand. Did you want to add something?
Sorry, and I'm just struggling a bit with the technology. Sorry to raise my hand. I just wanted to clarify that the 17,144,100 actually was paid to 25,101 persons. And what PS indicated there is that 14,737 persons would have received a value of 150 per month, meaning that they would have gotten 450. 7,731 persons would have received an additional $300 per month, and 2,633 persons would have received an additional $450 for the month. So it was a total of 25,101 persons who are food card beneficiaries at the time who would have received that top-up.
And if I want to ask the question then, this 25,101 persons would be all the persons on your database for food card?
At that point in time, exactly, that's correct.
And the point in time is what point in time?
That was April 2020.
As of April 2020?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I recognize Member Mark. Member Mark, could you unmute, please?
Are you hearing me, Madam Chair?
Most clearly.
Right, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to ask the Deputy Permanent Secretary whether the number of 25,000 or thereabouts that I understand existed up to April of 2020. Can we be advised what has been the additional numbers up to December 31st? May I?
Member Mark, if you I can give you that figure. I know the figure has risen, and I can give you that figure momentarily.
Okay, or you can put it in writing, Deputy PS, right?
Yeah.
Now, I just wanted to clarify again this concept of social protection. One of the elements would be dealing with the whole issue of poverty, nutritional intake, etc. I'm sure that would be featuring somewhere in your assessment of granting a certain sum of money, whether it's 150, whether it's a max of 510, as the case may be. Can you share with us whether the ministry has been able to determine a poverty rate in the context of what would be required in terms of dollars and cents for a person to have the appropriate nutritional intake given the quantum that they would be receiving from the Ministry of Social Development to deal with their daily needs? Is there any kind of mechanism within that framework that would be guiding the Ministry of Social Development? Can you clarify?
Yes, there is. In terms of, we do a standard means test. And this standard means test take into account the survey of living conditions. Unfortunately, we are using that data from 2005, which would have told us what is the poverty line and what is the vulnerability line. There was a survey that was conducted in 2014, but there were reasons why it was not accepted. So unfortunately, we are using the 2005 figures.
So we are currently, so we are now utilizing, as you said, PS, the 2005 survey of living conditions. But wouldn't that place the personnel who have to access these various grants and various social packages from the ministry, would that not place those recipients at a disadvantage, having regard to the fact that we are living in 2021 now leaving 2020, but yet still we are looking at conditions in 2005. Would you not agree with me that something has to be done for us to update the survey of living conditions so you can get a more accurate measurement of the state of poverty in TNT?
May I ask Member Ganga Prasad to take that question, please?
Sure. Thank you very much, Chair. And just to answer the previous question, the figures at December now stands at 29,261 families, households who are in receipt of the food support program, 29,261. In terms of the standard means test that PS spoke about, the ministry, notwithstanding the limitation as it relates to updated poverty reports, we did use the retail price index to inflate the figures that was provided to us in the last report so that we can get an updated figure. We are expecting that the 2021, there should have been a SLC in 2020, but because of the COVID-19, it didn't commence, and I know it is expected to take place in 2021. However, we would usually use the retail price index to inflate the prices that were in those reports to give us a more realistic point in time estimate of the levels.
Can you provide us in writing the elements or the components that would go into arriving at the standard means test so that we, at the level of this committee, will have an appreciation of what are the elements or components that will be guiding the ministry?
So we will do that.
All right. The other thing, Madam Chair, if I may ask, is this. Is there a cap? I want to go back to the chairman's question, because we live in very, very difficult times and resources are very scarce. So even though we're in a COVID period, and we have to focus on the vulnerable, the weak, and the poor, the government doesn't have an open, bottomless pit of monies to just make available. So is there or was there ever a cap on what the ministry cannot go above as it relates to these various social services and or packages that we have on page 2 of your report? Because right now, as you said, it is open. It is open. It is now 352 at the moment in terms of the total expenditure. But we are being told by the Deputy Permanent Secretary, April, it was 25,000. Now it is 29,000 and rising. Can we, is there a figure that the ministry works with, or is it just open season? Anybody can apply and anybody will get. I'm trying to understand that arrangement.
Mr. Ganga Prasad.
Thank you, through the Chair. What I spoke to earlier on was our food card database. In the month of April, we had 25,101 persons, and there was a decision to give these families a top-up. The food card program that I'm referring to is our permanent food card program. So the increase that I indicated a while ago was the increase to our permanent food card program beneficiary listing, which has grown from April 2020 to January 2021 to 29,261 persons. There's no cap on that. Once persons out there meet the requirement and come before us and they satisfy all of the documentary requirement, we would give the grant. As it relates to COVID, this figure that I spoke to you about is not related to COVID. That 29,000 is our permanent food card holders. I just wanted to make the distinction.
Okay, and therefore, just to follow up on, I think, what Member Mark asked, I want to ask it in another way. The PS has said, and you too, Mr. Ganga-Prasad, that, okay, after the 30th of November, you spent about 351 million plus on all the grants. The PS says that those will be monies processed and paid. The PS says there's another 23 million being processed. Does that relate to all of the COVID grants?
Okay, I thought I heard PS say $23 million. If so, sorry. Actually, so sorry. Actually, the outstanding numbers to be paid up to the period in question is 4,721 persons. 4,721 persons. That is the outstanding numbers to be paid income and food support. Persons who would have applied and to be paid.
Yes, okay. But what I'm asking, and I heard $23 million also. The 351 million, okay, does not refer to, if I'm understanding the conversation, the food support. The 351 million plus, okay, the almost 352 million. My understanding is it relates to all your COVID grants. And that figure is as of the 30th of November, 2020. I think I understood the PS to say there's another $23 million to be processed and paid. I'm asking if it relates to all of your grants, so that your 352 million will now end up to be something like 374 million or 75 million.
All right.
And there may be a bit more as well, because as I said, those...
Just before we go to the little more, I just want to understand if I have got you correctly.
Yes, you have.
Okay? And because you see, we're trying to get an idea, because you said there's no cap, or there was no cap. Okay? You said, though, the gates are now closed.
Yes.
Okay? So it means while you had no cap, we could now sort of come to a sort of parameter of what your total spend is likely to be. And that's what we're trying to follow from the information that we have before us. Okay? So as of today, you have it's likely you have spent about $375 million on all of your grants. And the grants we're talking about are the COVID grants. We're not talking about what Mr. Ganga-Prasad has told us would be your usual food support, your usual food card.
Yes, that's true.
Okay? So, having regard to the fact that you have spent $375 million or thereabouts, we would like to know if you can give us an idea of the number of persons per category who would have been beneficiaries on these grants that came up to $375 million or thereabouts. Yes?
Certainly we can do that. We will provide that information.
Yes. Mr. Ganga-Prasad, I'm seeing you too.
Oh, sorry. I was going to answer and I was going to provide you with the numbers. Sure?
If you can, please.
Right. So the persons who we provided an additional top-up to for food were 25,101. The person who would have received food support is 52,579 persons. The persons who would have received income support is 50,696 persons. We also provided a top-up to existing public assistance and disability assistance beneficiaries. That was 42,451 persons. We also provided a grant to persons who would have applied for pension, but whose case was not determined. That was 2,818 persons. We also provided assistance to persons who would have applied for disability assistance, but their grant was not determined. That was 488 persons. We provided emergency hampers through our HERD project, 1,400 hampers. Food vouchers. This would have been done in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture and the MPs. 24,999 persons would have benefited from those. We also provided rental assistance in the to 4,322 persons.
Thank you very much.
Chair, in addition to that, we also provided 20,497 cards to children on the school feeding programs through the MPs. Food cards.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, you're on mute.
Thank you. You have a provision here for food support to households that receive meals from school feeding program, but who are not current beneficiaries of food support. Okay? If I could get some clarification on what that is, because I thought it was children who were the beneficiaries of the school feeding program. So that 3 or 4 children in a family may have qualified for the school feeding programs. You're not dealing with a household, you're dealing with individual children. But now you're telling me that the food support went to the household. So what I'm trying to find out is, was the figure given to those households related to the number of children within the household who are beneficiaries of the school feeding program?
Chair, what happened is that when we got the database from Ministry of Education for children who are registered under the school feeding program, we ran it against our data, for the parents of the children, that is, we ran it against our database. And where the household was already in receipt of a food card, those children would not have gotten a card. That household would not have gotten a school feeding card.
Okay, and was there any other benefit given to that household?
Those households would have already been on our food support program. Some of them would have been getting public assistance, some senior citizens pension, some disability grants. So they were our existing clients, those households.
Okay, and in terms of the whole idea that you were premised on leaving no one behind, no child behind, how would it have been rationalized that these children, let's say there was a household with 6 children going to school, so the 6 of them getting on the school feeding, their parents still getting a grant, this is pre-COVID, their parents still getting a grant through you for some sort of income support, food support, or whatever grant. But then when it comes to COVID, if it is that the household was already on your database, the support that is given intended for children who were beneficiaries of this school feeding and not getting don't qualify. How does that tie in with the concept of leaving no one behind, no child behind, and the SDG goal 10 that you said that your program was premised?
Okay, it tied in to, remember we told you that we give our current clients top-ups?
Yes.
Right, so that's where they would have gotten the top-up in terms of food or public assistance. They would have gotten, depending on the number of the persons in the households.
All right.
They got under that program, the existing clients.
Thank you very much. Member Dionarai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to ask some follow-up questions on what would have been asked by Member Mark and also by Madam Chair. Now, in the budget, during the budget discussion, we heard in the budget discussion, the minister, the honorable minister in the ministry, in your ministry, indicated that, and I quote, the provision of the following grants and services cost taxpayers approximately $5.1 billion. And she went ahead to categorize them as senior citizens pension, public assistance grants, disability grants, food cards, etc. Right? Now, based on the information that you would have provided in your written response, so far we have a number of 351 million plus about 32 million with respect to the food cards given to the MPs, and the additional 23 million that you said that is still being processed, right? Could you explain to me, and that actually sums up to less than $1 billion. Could you explain to me where the following $4 billion comes from?
5.1 billion Chair refers to our normal grants, our usual clients who get senior citizen pension, public support, not COVID. That 5.1 billion is approximately what we spend for our normal, regular clients.
Right. Okay, so that's understood. Then in that case, would it be possible for you to provide us in writing the categorization according to senior citizen pension, disability grants? So that we could have an idea of exactly how that 5.1 billion was allocated.
Sure, we can do that.
Member Mr. Ganga Prasad.
Mr. Ganga Prasad, I think you're on mute.
Thank you very much, and sorry about that, Chair, through you. Just wanted to provide the information rather than have you all waiting for it. The senior citizen pension, we spend $350 million on a monthly basis, $350 million. The disability assistance grant, $47.9 million on a monthly basis. The disability assistance grant for children, $4 million on a monthly basis. The public assistance grant, $27.8 million on a monthly basis, and food support, $16.7 million on a monthly basis. That is around close to probably $475 million on a monthly basis on those core services of the ministry, not COVID, the core services of the ministry.
Okay, all right, that's understood. Madam Chair, through you, I would like to follow up on a question that Member Mark would have asked with respect to the poverty rate and the use of the 2005 SLC to determine I believe, the $1,530 for the 3 months of food support. Now, Mr. Ganga Prasad, you indicated that you all inflated the poverty line, and I know you would have indicated that to us in a previous meeting that we would have had. And in that meeting, you did indicate that the inflated poverty line then was $1,435, I believe it was, per month. Is it per month or on an annual basis?
$1,439.02 on a monthly basis. That's correct.
And is that the same inflated poverty line that you ended up using when the $1,530 was determined as the amount for the COVID-19 food support relief?
Those grants, so there's two concepts. I just want to explain the The poverty line at 1,439.02 is a person, a single person. That line would go up as members, as you have more members in the household. Yeah, so we would have used the adult equivalency scale to calculate household poverty. That is only for a single person. And just to explain, what we did in the ministry is use our existing grant structure. So for instance, 510 is the amount of money we would pay to a family of a particular size. So we use existing grant structure to make those payments. So as it relates to the public, the food card, we have an emergency food card in the ministry. That the value of that card is $510.
Right. And what determines that $510?
That was a fixed sum. It was an approval, and I would imagine it was based on affordability. But it was a fixed sum, and it's there in terms of trying to establish whether or not the poverty line is what directed that figure. The answer to that is no. The understanding here is that our grants are not meant to be supporting fully, but it's really meant to supplement what persons can earn for themselves. So for instance, a family can qualify for a public assistance grant of $1,900 from this ministry, and by virtue of qualifying for the public assistance grant, would also qualify for a food card of $800. So it is a combination of things that could probably lead up to a family being able to sustain themselves.
So what you're saying is that at any one point, one household could possibly be beneficiaries of more than one of the grants that you will have available.
That's correct, more than one. You can have a household receiving disability assistance grant. That same household could be receiving a public assistance grant based on the circumstances and also receive a food card. Okay. And there are other variables inside of it which would possibly result in other services of the ministry.
So just to verify, the determination of the $510 per month had nothing to do with the Ministry of Social Development going and speaking to the CSO or looking at the updated food prices index and so on to determine the amount of that it will cost to sustain a family for basic survival.
And that is correct. We did not, the discussion with the CSO was in establishing the poverty line. And in establishing that line is used to determine entry into the normal program. This is not COVID. COVID was once you're retrenched, terminated. But in our normal entry program requirement, we use those lines as calculated by document provided to us by CSO.
Okay, all right, thank you. I have one more question with respect to a general question, right? With respect to, so in total, you all would have received applications for various grants as a result of COVID. And obviously not everyone was eligible and not everyone qualified and not everyone would have received these grants, right? Because for the reasons you all would have outlined in the submission. So could you give us an estimate of the number of persons who were deemed ineligible through this application process for COVID-19 grants?
Again, Chair, through you, member, and I'll probably give you a little more than that. The ministry, on record, we had 62,645 application process. And the question you're asking is 4,889 was rejected.
How much? Could you repeat that, sorry?
4,889 applications were rejected.
Okay, so is there a mechanism in place for how you all dealt with these 4,800 and something persons?
When you said that, is it that you're asking if they were notified?
Yes, were they notified that they were disqualified or deemed not eligible?
Yes, we would have sent them a text message telling them that their grant was not approved.
Okay, so then in that case, now, could you remind me of the reasons why persons would have been deemed ineligible? I know you have it, but just for the listening public, could you remind us?
Okay, we use the effective date of retrenchment, termination, or reduction of income as March the 1st. So if you were retrenched or terminated or unemployed before March the 1st, you would have been disqualified. We also had a household threshold total income of $10,000. So if your household was earning in excess of $10,000, you would also not qualify. So those are some of the, and for instance, if you did not provide all the documents that we required, because to, first of all, qualify for a grant, you needed to be a national. A lot of persons who are non-national applied for grants. So we had requested a copy of your ID card. In case of an employed person, we wanted evidence that you were employed. So we wanted a letter from your employer, a pay slip, something to indicate that you were employed. In the case of a self-employed, we did accept evidence of self-employment. For instance, if you have a taxi badge to show that you're evidence of trade, you had a certificate of registration for your business, or in cases, we also relied on the references. We asked persons of a particular category to provide, to be shown as a reference, to certify that you were in the area of employment that you claim to be in. So those are the things. And if, for instance, some of those documents were not provided, especially your national identification card, and we would have communicated with you on several instances to provide it, because we did a lot of, we called persons, we even sent letters to persons for whom we didn't have contact numbers. And when we eventually got no response, I mean, we had no choice but to classify these applications as rejected.
Just one question with respect to that. Were there actually instances where you all would have followed up with persons and they did respond saying that to give you the correct information that you would have wanted or asked for?
Yes, we got a lot of, we were able to process a lot by getting the additional information we needed.
Okay, all right, Madam Chair, I will pause here now.
Yes, member, thank you very much. Mr. Ganga Prasad, I think I recognize that your hand was raised to lend further assistance.
Thank you, Chair. Through you again. I just, for the purposes of completeness, I just wanted to explain that we also, when I provided the figures about the 4,889 there, it was for those persons who would have applied for either retrenched, terminated, or reduced income. We also processed the rental assistance grant, and I know my colleague is here, but we received 7,354 requests for rental assistance grant, and for completeness, just to answer your question, 1,450 of those were rejected. Yeah? So we received 7,354, 1,450 were rejected. And if I, just to add to what the PS was saying, as it relates and to answer the question on persons getting the opportunities to have redress, persons, we actually set up an entire unit in the ministry that was dedicated to calling persons. So our first response was not to reject application because it wasn't completed. Applications, once it was vetted and we realized that they were missing documents or there was probably something just wrong with the application, we set up a unit that called these persons individually to ask them to complete their application. Persons did not have to come in. We had WhatsApp, so you could WhatsApp a picture of your ID or your pay slip or whatever it is, or you could email those documents, or of course you could have walked in. So a number of people through our queries unit would have gotten their application rectified, and then it would have been approved and passed through the system, and persons would have gotten paid.
Okay, thank you. Member Bacchus?
Yes, the PS or Deputy PS. So yes, I saw that, and I'm very thankful, Mr. Prasad, for the clarification for the other categories, because in reading the written submission, what I found is that it was limited to one specific segment of what it was. So I'm glad that you were able to expand it, and I'm sure there would have been rejections if you go straight across the board for all. What would have been useful, I think, as well, would have been a breakdown of that, or if not, just simply the mood. What was the most popular form of rejection, so that it could guide us going forward as to where we stand. Some of this may be linked to the fact that maybe people just didn't understand where we were. Some of it may be linked to the deliberate attempts at fraud, which may be where it is. But the idea is that we needed to understand what was the most popular form that related to some level of rejection and or some level of recommunication with, so that we can then establish or further guide our processes as we go forward, because this will not be the only occasion where we will need to do it.
Thank you, Madam Pierce.
Provide that information. We will provide that information.
Member Bodo.
May I, Madam, when you're ready?
If you're ready, Member Mark, yes, please proceed.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask the peers again under this heading of social development or sustainable development goals. I wanted to ask the peers if there's any way or any mechanism that they have been able to use to measure the efficacy of their various social facilities having regard to the alignment between the SDG number 10 and their efforts at dealing with poverty and inequalities. Is there any mechanism that we have in place to measure how effective we have been in achieving sustainable goal number 10, either the PS or Mr. Deputy Permanent Secretary?
DPS, you want to take this one?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Again, Chair, through you, member, the ministry has its monitoring and evaluation division, which has been, or which is in the process of developing the framework within which all our services will be evaluated. In fact, we, not too long ago, developed our strategic plan, which we brought in alignment with the National Development Plan, as well as you probably would be aware of our National Social Mitigation Plan. And we are currently in the process of ensuring, through our monitoring and evaluation division, we, not too long, probably under a year or probably less than a year, it was during COVID, probably around April or May, we brought on the director of monitoring and evaluation division, and we are currently developing the framework that will allow us to not only measure, but to predict where we are supposed to be in the next few years. Additionally, we are also at the cusp of implementing what we call ISEM, the Integrated Social Enterprise Management System. And that system is going to be, the key indicators that we have to track will be built into that system, into a strategy that will allow us to get real-time data as to where we are. So within the next, I would say probably within a year or probably less, we will have the monitoring and evaluation framework ready, properly aligned to the SDGs as well as our National Development Plan, to be able to report on where we are in terms of meeting our developmental objectives.
You have any time frame for the implementation of these initiatives? Because apart from the ISEMS, you have the step-up developmental model, and you also have the integrated service delivery through the establishment of the Social Services and Empowerment Unit as well. Any idea as to when these very important initiatives will be implemented, any time frame? And what about the costs these initiatives will generate?
Right. So, Chair Chui again, member, in fact, just this morning, I was out into one of the regions where we were doing some sensitization as it relates to 4 matters in the ministry, which is the integrated model, Step Up, the Social Services and Empowerment Unit, and ISEMs. ISEM, we already have a consultant on board and they are doing at the discovery phase right now. And in fact, just before Christmas, they presented a prototype of what they came up with so far. So ISEM is a few months away. I just want to put it right at a few months away. In terms of Step Up, we have to understand that the way in which we deliver social services is not the best. We are probably missing the mark oftentimes. This ministry has been providing grants, and as you're aware, we are providing grants to probably more than 150,000 persons out there. But in terms of assisting these families to move out of the situation that they are in, it has been sporadic, limited, and Step Up is intended to bridge that gap. With everything that we are talking about, the integrated model, ISEM, the SSE, and Step Up. Step Up and the integrated model, we are expecting at least a pilot by probably sometime April or May. Step Up being one of the major initiatives in terms of working with families, not as single person who come for a grant, but as households that have some strength that we could capitalize and build on to help them graduate from the programs that we have. So in the long term, I want to probably say that the intention really is for the ministry to start to reduce clientele by helping them to graduate from these programs and into sustainable livelihoods.
Can you tell us?
Member Mark, if you just permit me, I just would like to ask Mr. Ganga Prasad about something he just said with respect to ISEMs. Is that program behind in terms of time?
No, it is not behind in terms of time. And PS might be able to help me here. That contract was signed. I think what kept it back at some point in time was the whole issue of COVID and the fact that we couldn't group, but it has since started. It is not behind as far as I'm aware. As I indicated, the prototype, the consultant already showed us what they have gotten so far in terms of the system. So it's not behind, and what we are using in the interim is something called the SSCMS. It's something that was built in-house, and we are using it right now to track in terms of beneficiaries, expenditure. So most of the data that I'm rattling out here or calling out to you is extracted from the SSCMS right now. Yeah?
Okay, and the reason why I asked that is that when you all appeared before us in March, ISEMs was anticipated to be operational within 9 months. So, and that's why I asked if it was behind. And therefore, now that you have inputted COVID, I wonder when you say it's a few months away, whether that few months means next 2 months or whether it means a further 9 months away. Okay, because the very system with which you're operating and which you are saying you've relied upon, that is your SSCMS, in your inquiry in March, we learned of all the deficiencies with that system and your client capture data information and so on. So that if that is what you're still working with, I would want to ask what, having regard to your significant change in your mandate to which your PS referred to, what in-house systems were taken to strengthen your SSCMS system and or to mitigate the challenges that COVID would have incurred?
Well, Chair, I just indicate that I can assure you that it is not 9 months away. I I would be really disappointed if it was, because it is really something that is going to revolutionize the way that the ministry do business. And ISEM is not only something for this ministry, it will allow us to interoperate with several entities, ministries, and agencies out there. In terms of the SSCMS, over time, some of the limitations that we have had in the SSCMS have been aggressively pursued by our IT. I know that we would have signed on to an MOU with the National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago so that we could interoperate, or at least to share information. We also have an MOU with the Registrar General where we could share register of births and death. We recently also, and this is one of the key things that I think that we need to have some discussion on, we recently also had a meeting with the Elections and Boundaries Commission, so that at least we can verify that the persons who are applying by us, that their identity, at least their identity from that standpoint, is accurate. Yeah. And just to add, Madam Chair, some of the other features of the SSCMS between the time we last met in March to now, I'm certain that we can prepare a document and submit something in writing so that you can get an idea of how we are using the existing system to ensure accountability for the funds of the state, as well as to service our population as best as we can.
Thank you, and I assure you in the recommendations that has been asked for, so it should be with you at this time. Okay, so might I invite Member Rambarath to join the conversation.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Permanent Secretary and Deputy Permanent Secretary and other officials. I've been following, we've gotten off to a lot of details, but I wanted as my first question to ask you, Deputy Permanent Secretary, two questions. The first is, what is your overall assessment of the management so far by the ministry of these COVID obligations, I would call them? What is your overall assessment? And the second question I'd ask you is, what you consider to be the main challenge in managing these COVID obligations by the ministry? Thank you.
I almost going to say, PS, you want to take this one, but it was directed to me. I think that the ministry, my honest view is that the ministry did a highly commendable job. The ministry usually is accustomed to processing around 20,000, probably not more than 25,000 applications all told, all of the grants that we have in a year. And here we were asked in March to process in excess of 60,000 as they come in a very rapid manner. I don't think we ever planned for something like that. And I think it required us to think quickly. In fact, the executive of this ministry, since the announcement that we had to play a crucial role in terms of supporting families out there, we were here from Monday to Sunday. And the major thing, our preoccupation was really, how can we do it better? What to do and how can we do it better? So I think that we were not fixed. We were willing to, in terms of change the way we were doing business. We, at the initial stages, because of COVID, I think we said it was only online application to avoid contact. We recognized that this was going to be a challenge. Some families would not have had the ability to send online application, and we set up a parallel system in all our regional offices, including our central office. Yeah, firstly, of course, we said we were going to do payment by debit cards as well. We had to rethink that idea, and we eventually went direct deposit as well as through checks. So it was a constant review and analyzing what we were doing to respond to the citizens and their cry for support out there. I would give the ministry a passing grade, notwithstanding the challenges. We did well. We processed over 60,000 applications in less than 6 months. And that was highly commendable in terms of what we would usually have to do. And I would say in processing that, we also maintained the payment, our obligation to 170,000 of our core beneficiaries, over 100,000 pensioners out there depended on us on a monthly basis. And we never for once paid them late or in an incorrect amount. The disability assistant, grant recipient, public assistance, food card beneficiaries, we continue to pay those persons. So I think we did pretty well in the circumstances. There were challenges, as I indicated. Our main challenge at the time was, of course, the technology. We relied on technology to help us. And even downloading an application posed a serious challenge for us. Yeah? And we had to...
Downloading by the, sorry to interrupt, but downloading by the applicant or?
No, download on both ends, because we recognize as well that the applicants had issue. That form that we used started off with a multi-page form that it's probably 7 or 8 pages long, because we wanted to make sure that we could, the accountability is there. So we wanted to ask persons all kind of questions, as well as we had the need for collecting data. And eventually, because of the cries of the population, of the length of the form, that form was cut down to just 2 pages, but still ensuring the robustness of the system. But on our end, these persons scanned the documents and sent it in, and then they had multiple documents, and they used various forms of scanning, either taking a picture, JPEG, all of these different things and sending it, and that posed a challenge, because it was sometimes downloading one application with 20 documents. Yeah. It was a challenge. And you could well imagine that we required these documents to ensure that the application is in order. Yeah?
I just want to follow up with the obvious questions based on all that had gone before. And would you say that there would have been some double and triple dipping? In other words, where you already have an existing layer of benefits being paid to your traditional clientele, and then we introduce, on account of COVID, some new benefits, including things specific to school children and other things. Would you say that there was a risk of double and triple and quadruple dipping, and we may have had some of that in the system?
What I want to say, in answering the question, I want to say it's not double dipping, but some sort of additional support were given to persons who are existing beneficiaries. As I indicated, all of our disability assistant, grant recipient, public assistance, and food card all received additional support. Yeah, right. The system, yes, there were persons who were trying to beat the system. Hence the reason why we were strict on the fact that we were using only the ID card. Mm-hmm. ID card was the sole piece of a unique identifier that allowed us to always cross-check on our database to ensure that persons were not already receiving a grant, if that was one of the requirements for receiving a COVID grant. We also would have consulted the database heavily in terms of when the Ministry of Education sent their names for us, we ran those names against our database before we sent it out to MPs, so that the MPs would know that at least these families are not in receipt of a food card, so you can proceed to give them a card. We tried as much as possible to reduce excessive leakage of state funds. I would admit, though, that there were instances, and it's probably, we need to examine how much, but there would have been instances, but I know in terms of the numbers of grant process, it would have been minimal in terms of persons who would have received based on attempting to double dip.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank the Permanent Secretary and yourself and the public servants in the ministry for I would give you more than a passing grade. You started off by giving yourself a very high grade and then you dropped the passing. But I think that it is a commendable effort in these circumstances. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Barthelemy. Member, you need to unmute.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members. Good afternoon, Deputy Ganga Prasad and Mrs. Sitaran. My question goes to Mr. Ganga Prasad. Do you believe satisfactory interventions were available to young persons and young families during this time?
Satisfactory. The ministry did well. I think we would have delivered to all persons out there on the mandate we were given. I want to also indicate that we also provided the softer side of the ministry, which was counseling support. Families who were unable to cope, we did have our National Family Services available via our walk-in services as well. We also provided assistance through mobile. We got mobile phone and they were allocated to officers so that calls could be made. So, probably to answer your question, I think we delivered on our mandate. The research is yet to show whether or not there were gaps in the service and whether or not going forward, as a member alluded to earlier, this would not probably be the only time on how we can fill those gaps. Yeah, but certainly as it relates to our mandate, and I specifically made reference to the grant, but more so supporting children who were registered in the school feeding program as one of the major cohort that you would probably be making mention of.
And what were some of the technology improvements identified for or during this COVID period?
We took a system called the SSCMS that was really built to manage our client database and upscale that. And as I indicated earlier on, we would probably send a paper to you so that we could probably, especially in terms of the language that the IT people in the ministry will speak, to be able to give you those upgrades. But in my layman, we took a system that was built to manage our normal day-to-day client and escalate that system, use that system to do data entry, to allow us to verify information on that system, to allow us to cross-check information with other entities, to allow us to interoperate with the bank so that we could make sure that cards are done and direct deposit is made, to interoperate with the NIBTT through that system to ensure that checks for COVID applicants are processed and payment, as well as everything in terms of my utterances here, in terms of numbers, came out of that system. Yeah? And we made a commitment to provide, in terms of the persons who might put it better, those advances or those upgrades that we have done to facilitate during the time of COVID.
And coming out of those technological advances, do you see opportunity for new skill sets, specifically for young people, to assist with this new way of life and the way in which you'll have to do business moving forward? And also, what are some of the training opportunities available for persons who may not be tech savvy?
Well, to answer your question, the answer to that is yes, there are many opportunities. We saw it. And just to indicate to you that many of the persons who was assisting on the SSCMS and those technological development that you talk about, and kudos to those persons, were OJTs. They were here and they fell smack in the middle of our response to COVID, and they did not take their responsibility. They came out. They were the ones who were doing all of those other technological changes that we needed. They were the ones who were doing support and making that happen. So they are here. We had about probably 10 or 15 of those who came in just before COVID. And I think in terms of, it's not a rude awakening, but I think they got an opportunity to learn and to learn quickly. So, but there's always opportunity for more learning in terms of those areas. But this ministry is not only a ministry that provides, we have the technology that will drive the way we do business. But the ministry is also about providing other types of services that wouldn't really require such, technology. Everyone might be technology, but the reality is that persons would have to become familiar. It is no longer going to be, even after COVID, the world is not going to be at the same place as we know it. So having that slang saying we're going back to normal, I don't think that we'll ever go back to normal. It is just the way we would have to do business now, and persons would need to know where I need to fit in. And how do I upgrade my skill if I have to upgrade my skill? Because even a number of services that people out there need is going to be available online. And they may have a significant gap if they themselves do not upgrade their skills to start to navigate online services.
Thank you so much, PS Teacher Ann and Deputy PS Gangapsad, and all OJTs who made this as smooth as possible. We appreciate your efforts.
Member Newell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you, I have a couple of the questions that I would like to ask both the acting PS and Mr. Gangapsad. Now, I'm looking at the criteria for approving social support measures due to COVID-19. That is the appendix that you all would have provided us with. Now, and before I ask the question, just confirm for me that the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services was responsible for the income support grants to those persons who fall in the informal economy, right? While Ministry of Finance was providing income support to those persons who would have been NIB registered or registered with the National Insurance Board.
That was the intent at first. In terms of persons who have NIS numbers, we would not pay any grants. But eventually, when we realized the NIB didn't pay some of them, we cross-check in terms of data and see what they had paid, and then we would have paid some of those.
Okay, so with respect to persons who would have been applying who are part of the informal economy, those informal workers, persons who would have probably been operating a nail salon at the bottom of their house, or some simple type of business, maybe private taxi drivers and so on, right? Now, I see one of the requirements under the general conditions was that a certificate of registration or incorporation of business for a company was required. Now, if these persons form part of the informal economy, they would not have those documents in their possession. Now, I know this is for employers or employees, right? That is the Form A that you have provided us with. But what if those businesses would have hired persons and therefore these employees would have been laid off and not able to provide documentation to you all that, for example, the business registration and so on, because that person that they work for is not registered?
Okay, what we asked for is a letter. They could have gotten a letter from the employer on a letterhead, or they could have a pay slip would suffice. And other instances where these persons were unable to provide that, we relied on a recommender from the class that, say, immigration would have used long ago, like a minister and a senior public servant and so on.
Right. So now I saw that the self-employed persons who are applied who were self-employed, those persons were offered the option of using a recommender. However, persons in Form A who are employed by a business or by a person did not have that option under the general conditions. So is it that you're saying that in instances where a business registration was not available, they were able to provide an alternative as, for example, a payslip or employer stamp or letterhead and so on?
Yes, that was the case.
Okay, all right. Thanks. My other question is with respect to, now, I saw in your written submission that you all drew reference to the fact that you all advertised a lot in terms of the types of grants that were available. You all use all means available to you all in terms of social media, website, TV advertisements, radio advertisements, and so on. And I have to admit and commend you all because I did hear it a lot. I did see it a lot on my Facebook feed. However, and I know everyone is aware of this, what initiatives you all adopted to reach out to persons who are somewhat disconnected from exactly what was happening because of maybe not being able to have adequate supply of electricity, not having in such extreme poverty that they really don't know what is going on and what is being offered and available. Now, and I ask this question because if we, and I think up to now, if we look at the news on a daily basis, a lot of these situations were highlighted on a daily basis as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So in seeing this, were there any sort of outreach to those persons who really probably would not have been aware of what was being offered by the government and what they could qualify for, etc.?
In terms of the COVID grant, we were doing outreaches up to, I think it's April, in terms of our normal outreaches. But because of COVID and the restrictions, we were unable to actually have outreach caravans, as we call them. But in terms of grants, you would not believe how quickly word spread. And I mean, persons in every, as you would call it, nook and cranny knew that we had grants to give, and they did apply for them.
Okay, so then in that case, in persons who found it difficult to fill out forms and so on, you all had a unit dedicated towards helping those persons?
Yeah, those persons would have visited all of our 10 local boards and they would have gotten assistance to fill out complete forms and so on, because we actually did have application forms there for them.
Okay, so tell me something. On average, and I think Mr. Ganga Prasad did provide a figure, but I just want to confirm, is it that a total of 4,889 persons in the informal economy were beneficiaries of the income support grant?
No, I think that figure relates to the rejections. A lot of persons were beneficiaries of the grants, informal or formal.
Could you provide me with the figure if it's available?
We can tell you in terms of employed and self-employed.
Okay, yes.
Because what happened, our system, because of the quantum of grants and the delay in processing, we eliminated some of the data in capturing on the application forms. Like, for instance, the job positions and so on, we weren't able to capture all that data in our system. But we would provide in terms of employed and self-employed.
Okay, Mr. Ganga Prasad.
Just 1 minute, Member Duderine. I think if we could just allow Mr. Ganga Prasad to intervene here with respect to that question and the numbers. Yes?
Great. Thank you, Chair, Member, to you, Chair. I just wanted to give you all, PS did indicate that what we did is we left our offices open. We didn't close our offices. So we ensured, and what we did is that COVID support, we did this as broadly as possible in terms of government intervention by including NGOs and faith-based organizations, hoping that we could reach as many people who are affected as possible. Yeah. So it wasn't as if the ministry was here alone. It was multiple strategies to get to persons, inclusive of MPs, members of parliament, and the churches and those organizations. But just to give you so that you can have an idea, we had 29,851 applications coming through our offices. In fact, we had 53,229 persons who walked through our offices during the time of COVID, inquiring about COVID support. Those were just walking through our offices. I'm not talking about persons who came online. We took 29,851 applications. Out of that, 17,062 of those were self-employed persons. The forms, if you are familiar with the form was a Form A and a Form B. The Form A was for persons who would have had employment, and the Form B was self-employment. So 17,062 of those forms were actual self-employed person, and it was the majority of applicants through our offices were self-employed. So if you take that data, just that data out of that 29,851 and do some calculation, you'll probably get a rough idea, because it's a huge enough sample to be able to discern how much persons in the self-employed category we may have assisted.
Okay, then Mr. Ganga-Prasad, then a follow-up question. Then tell me something, have all these grants been processed, or does it form part of those who are still awaiting receipt of these grants?
Mr. Ganga-Prasad, you have to unmute. A reminder to unmute.
Sorry. The new normal is saying we received 62,645 applications, and I indicated earlier on the numbers of persons who would have been paid and who would have been rejected in terms of service. And I also indicated that there's only 4,721 persons that are outstanding. Yeah? Okay. So we would have paid the majority of those persons.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ganga-Prasad. Now, a follow-up question that Ms. Bartholomew asked, Member Bartholomew asked. She did ask about the youth and the receipt of support by the youth who would have been affected due to COVID-19. Now, through the monitoring and evaluation unit that you all have there, you all could give us some idea of the distribution of the individuals who would have, demographic distribution of individuals who would have received support. Maybe you could submit this in writing, but what I'm referring to in terms of gender, age, persons who would have, in particular location, persons who would have probably already been unemployed. Is that data available, and is something that is being tracked on a regular basis?
We can. We can provide you with that data. I know it was done. We, in fact, had disaggregated the persons we paid because we have the ID card number, and we did disaggregate the persons by age category. Mm-hmm. So we would be able to provide that information.
Right. And my final question before I pause, Madam Chair, through you, is that I know you mentioned in your written submission the inordinate delays that existed, and you did explain that you all had to boycott using one means of payment and resort to an alternative means of payment and so on. But since March to now, a lot of time has passed, and we know this pandemic is an ongoing situation that could easily explode at any minute. From since then, has there been any improvements in terms of the payment system that is currently being used? I'm not talking about the plans for the upgrade of the data management system that is foreseen in the medium term. I'm talking about in the short term, what improvements has been adopted to reduce these inordinate delays that occurred. Because we're talking that this pandemic happened in March. It was supposed to be, payments are supposed to be for March, April, May, but we have $23 million that is still being pending for disbursement. So tell me what improvements to the payment system has been made so far.
Okay, the delays are not in terms of the payment system or processing. As I said, we have already processed quite a bit of applications. The delay is in the release of funds to make those payments. So in terms of those applications that are processed already, which is quite a few, we are up to date in our processing. There's no backlog or delay.
Okay.
Only delay is the release of funds.
Okay, and what would solve that problem in terms of the release of funds?
Well, if we get the releases from budgets, it's just, we have requested the release. It's just to get the monies to make the payments.
Okay. Madam Chair, my last question, I promise. With respect to, now that you mentioned Ministry of Finance, and Mr. Ganga Prasad, you did mention the number of persons in the informal economy who would have received grants. Is there any plans to liaise with the Ministry of Finance to have these informal persons who would have come through you all to receive these grants, to incorporate them into the formal economic system in terms of those self-employed persons, those 29,800 self-employed persons? Are there any plans to have those persons, for example, register their businesses, apply for BIR numbers, register with NIB, and so on?
In terms of our ministry, no, we don't have plans, but we can, if the Inland Revenue Division requests the information, we should be able to share it with them.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Bacchus? And thank you for being so patient, Mr. Bacchus.
No problem at all. I understand the quest for knowledge. Couple things. One, and either PS or Deputy PS could take this. In the challenges identified, and Senator Durine and so on alluded to one aspect of it, which was really specific to the payment. In my way in which I want to work with a lot of this is to make sure that all of the things that we do lead to an improvement of the service regardless of what condition we find ourselves in. I like to build resilience. The thing that came up in the challenges that I understood, that I think I'd like to hear how your take on how you managed it and how whatever you think we can do to make it better going forward is relative to the fact that you ran into a human resource challenge as it related to the processing of what you had. And the fact that you were able to in some ways employ what I have termed a whole of government solution, but that the way you described it as there's an all of government approach with various ministries and implementations as well. Could you, either of you or both, speak to where that went and how it went and the results of that, and how you would like to see it improve or otherwise?
Okay, in terms of the human resources, actually we got assistance from volunteers and from other ministries in terms of helping us to process some of the grants. As DPS had mentioned, even the downloading of the forms proved quite a challenge, and we did get assistance from other agencies for that. And even
PS, you're now muted.
Oh, sorry. At the point in time, as I said, we got help assistance from other ministries and government agencies. We got assistance from the private sector. They helped us in terms of accessing the forms, downloading and printing forms. So immediately we had to get even a simple thing as additional papers, lots of paper. We rented photocopy machines. We hired staff on short term. And we also got some volunteers. So it was an all-of-government approach, and that the other ministries assisted us with those challenges.
How do you see this adjusting going forward? The way in which you're describing this speaks to a fairly analog process. It speaks to additional hands on deck to assist in things, and specifically, it speaks to a lot of paper. How are the technological changes that you're going to make going to address this going forward in terms of efficiency and your ability to manage and produce within these types of scenarios going forward?
Okay, the system that we are currently implementing, which is ISIMS, the Integrated Management Enterprises System, We are looking at applications being online and processed online as well. So we are looking down the road, even in terms of our senior citizens, pensions and so on, we are looking to automate those processes. So people can apply online, they'll be processed online, and then the payments, even the payment system, we want to be able to come out of that system as well. So funds could probably go directly to their bank accounts, which is what we are trying to encourage, as opposed to check payments.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome.
Madam PS, I just wanted a little clarification in terms of something you had stated in response to Member Dionarine earlier. My understanding was that you all took up some of the remit of payments which were supposed to be made via the Ministry of Finance and NIB. Okay, is that correct?
Yes, but what we did, we had on a weekly basis, we would have exchanged information. So if somebody had applied to us and when we checked what the payments they would have made up to date, at that point in time, they did not receive payments, we would have paid them. And we also shared our payments information with the Ministry of Finance to avoid duplication and double dipping.
So do you have the number of persons whom you would have paid on behalf then of the Ministry of Finance?
Well, when you say on behalf, remember the Ministry of Finance had certain categories of persons they paid. They were not paid every person who had an NIS number. Their note, the minute had said they were paying certain categories of persons only.
And what were those categories? Because as Member Dionarine stated, and that was my understanding too, if you were in employment and you were on the database of NIB, which means you were paying NIS, you did not fall under the remit of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. So you may have been employed, but for some reason you're not on NIB's database, either because your employer not remitting NIS or you're not paying NIS or whatever the story is. You then went to Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. Once you were on NIB's database, that was Ministry of Finance. So I think there may be some misunderstanding on my part, and therefore, if you could clarify that. So to tell me that Ministry of Finance didn't pay all categories, I don't think helps to give me the clarification which I think I need.
Okay, I can't recall all of the categories that they paid, but I know they were paying certain persons in the service industry, like persons with bars and, you know, casinos, those sorts of things. But like, say the taxi driver didn't fall in a category in which they would have paid. Or the nut spender, the person selling nuts on the street.
But won't those be self-employed persons? Those won't be people in employment, a nut spender?
A lot of self-employed persons have NIS numbers.
Okay.
And that's what we came to realize. Apparently, at some point in the past, they were employed.
Okay. So then could you give us some clarification of that in writing and an idea of the numbers of people who initially you all felt under the Ministry of Finance, who you all paid? If you could give us an idea of the numbers and the quantum.
Sure, we'll provide that.
Thank you very much. Okay, Member Dionarine.
Madam Chair, no, I have a question with respect to the data management system and plans to upgrade the data management system through the Step Up and the Social Services Empowerment Unit and the ISEMs that we have been speaking a lot about. Now, in order to make this happen, I see that you need to have this supported by a change management plan and training and development of existing human resources. Do you foresee that you may need additional human resources?
In terms of change management, yes, because we don't have that particular skill within the ministry right now. So yes, we need change managers. we are looking at using our existing social welfare staff and staff at our National Family Services, our National Social Development Programs. We are seeing within the new structure that we are designing that staff can, with minor changes in terms of what they do, or, you know, that they can fit into that, the new model we are looking at, which is
sorry, go ahead.
Which is SSE. Because our existing, say, social welfare advisors, they already have a degree in social work. You know, we have
But with respect to the digitization of the core services, you don't foresee that you may need additional human resources, or that could be done within the ministry itself?
That can be done within the ministry, because it will make the work simpler and easier for persons. Because now anyone can access, say, if I were in the system, my account from any of the local boards. And as you update whatever information is there, it's for anyone to see, or anyone to have, or authorized persons to have access to.
Okay, Mr. Ganga Prasad, I see that you are raising your hand. Mr. Ganga Prasad.
Chair, through you. I just wanted to make a distinction. The SSCMS is going to be upgraded to ISEM. The SSCMS is not going to be upgraded with step up. Those are some ways of doing business. So SSCMS is moving into ISEM. And I just wanted to inform the committee that we are being heavily supported in this project by IGovTT. Yeah, they are with us all of the way, and they have been managing the procurement, and as well as they are still with us, and they are going to be with us long after implementation. And we have been having a really good relationship. We have a history with IGovTT, and we are having a really good relationship. We continue to have a good relationship with them and guiding us through this project right now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad that you clarified that, because I was just wondering if the temporary freeze in the hiring in the public service would affect you all in any way. However, the collaboration with IGovTT, I see it being able to facilitate the transition. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Member Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have a few questions. I know time is racing by, so I want you to help me to get these questions in. And the first question, I would like the distinguished Deputy PS to clarify. He did raise, Madam Chair, that NGOs were involved in the exercise, as well as faith-based organizations. Now, I would like to ask him if he can put in writing for this committee all the names of the NGOs that were involved, all the names of the faith-based organizations that were involved, and the respective allocations given to all of them, as well as the number of citizens who would have benefited from their efforts as a result of their grants that were allocated. Can we get that in writing, Mr. Ganga Prasad?
Sure, member. Through the chair, just to indicate that the question I answered was to demonstrate that it was not only one sort of or one strategy that was being used to reach persons out there. It was multiple strategies. The faith-based organization was really engaged by another ministry, but the information I'm certain we can provide it. Yeah.
The second thing I want to ask you, and I want to compliment you like my colleague, Clarence Rambarat, you all, given the fact that you're all actually in an age of the bullet train, but, you were really saddled with some old technology, and you all have done wonders, almost like the horse and buggy period. But I would like to ask you whether citizens have approached many of us, including myself, and particularly those who work in private and preschool settings, saying that they have submitted their applications and they are yet to receive any responses from the ministry as it relates to income support. I don't know if you are aware of this, but a lot of complaints have been coming as it relates to that sector of the economy.
So member, indicated earlier there were 4,721 persons who were processed but have not been paid as yet. So if the persons you are speaking to fall in that category, then I understand. But I just wanted to make a distinction. A lot of persons, I myself, receive queries from various persons, members of parliament included, who would have related to me that a person was not paid. And when I checked, the application was not with us, but it was we provided what we were calling income and food support, income support. And they would have applied for the salary relief grant. There was a number of applications. Those persons would have gone and made their application somewhere else and questioning them. And we would have realized, so if there are some persons like that, they are coming and no fault of their own, they would have made an application and the ministry is out there. So they are assuming that the application was made here. We have realized that several of these persons, the application was made here, but in fact, it was made for the salary relief grant. What I can say is that we have 4,721 persons that has not been processed as yet. And if those that you are talking about are in there, then I understand. And as PS indicated, we are making an effort to ensure that we could pay these persons.
All right, the third area I'd like to clarify, Mr. Ganga Prasad, or the PS, is what in a normal situation where you have everything under control, all the forms are correct, the information and data verified, what is the time frame for both employed and self-employed people upon submitting their application and the ministry issuing a check? Could you give us, for instance, a time frame in terms of the best case scenario and a middle kind of road scenario, as well as a worst case scenario? The time frame it will take between applying and you have everything correct and receiving the actual check for whatever support, whether it's food, income, whatever, dealing with employed persons who are formally employed and they have now been retrenched, and persons who are self-employed and they are no longer working.
Okay, I would say that in terms of us receiving the application with everything and processing it, we do run payment files weekly. However, if you did not provide a bank account, a valid bank account, those checks or cards, debit cards, are sent to TT Post to be couriered. So that will factor in another maybe 2 to 3 weeks. So best case is 1 month.
All right, Madam Chair, I have 2 final questions, and that has to do with the following, and maybe the PS can answer this. Is there a link or relationship between the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services and the UNDP in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals to see how Trinidad and Tobago is in fact faring in meeting those goals that are supposed to be realized at the end of 2030? Is there a link between the ministry, maybe through planning, and what is the status of that situation? Our standing, meeting that particular requirement, particularly sustainable goal number 10.
I would say that there is a link, and I would invite the Deputy PS to elaborate on it.
I just want to probably defer that we would send that, but yes, there's a definite link, and it would come through our various reporting mechanism that is usually through Ministry of Planning. And in fact, the UN do have I think is a report that they provide ever so often as it relates to where countries are in terms of meeting the various goals that are outlined. This ministry has to report to the Ministry of Planning on where we are, who would then report to the UNDP. So we will be able to provide you with something in writing as to where we are and what is the nature of that type of reporting that we do.
Yeah, my final question to either the PS or Mr. Ganga Prasad is this. What recommendations would you like to submit to this committee to assist and or aid your ministry in being able to carry out its mandate in a more efficient, effective, and economical way? So that, for instance, in this period of COVID-19 pandemic, the ministry can step up even more than you have done so far, given all the limitations that you have outlined. Would you want to put that in writing or give us a brief summary of your thinking as it relates to recommendations to assist you in becoming more efficient, effective, efficacious, as well as economical?
Okay, I would say that we would put it in writing. However, I can say that if you look at the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, we are at the bottom. When you look at accommodation, equipment, basic stuff for us to work with, we are always left out. Like, for instance, we are not a ministry that would have been allowed on government campus. Our accommodation is so terrible. Imagine we have at our local office in Port of Spain there, our clients have to stand on the streets in the rain and the sun, and imagine we are dealing with the most vulnerable. We need to be placed at a higher rank in terms of general, how people look at us as a ministry. Because as I said when I first came here, our officers look like our clients, and I don't mean it in a bad way. But I mean, we need to be better accommodated and better resources in terms of dealing with our clients. But we will send it for you in writing.
Thank you. Madam Chair, thank you so very much.
Mr. Ganga Prasad, I believe you wanted to add something to Member Mark's question.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think that and I agree, PS, we probably send some other recommendation, but I think that one of the things I think that we need to drive, and probably at your level, is the fact that this ministry, in dispensing services, we require information from some entities. Now that we are establishing ISEM, which will allow us to interoperate with several agencies, we cannot have agencies telling us that their information is private and confidential. We know that our information is private and confidential. If we could establish a link between the National Insurance Board, key to the processing of our grants, the civil registry, key to determining when someone dies so that we could take them off the grant, the immigration, our grant depends so much on what happens across there, the EBC, there are persons out there who are probably, trying things so that we would be able to interoperate with them. And there are other entities around. Then the persons who we are servicing would not have to go knocking when we require information. At all of these entities, we could have the information here. This was something that would have been discussed since 2017. And I think in 2021, we have to make that a reality, where when persons apply, we would not have to ask you to send in a copy of a payslip for us, or give us information, or take a piece of paper and go down to NIB, or go to, we would have the information. We would be able to interoperate with these agencies. The information will be there. Of course, we will be bounded by confidentiality, but I think we'll be extremely, providing a higher quality service to the people who we are serving out there. So I think that would be one of the things that I would look forward to.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ganga Prasad. Thank you, Member Mark, Member Bacchus, and then Member Duran.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One, I understand the relationships of state in that the praise is heaped upon IGov and the work that they've been doing, but this is very symbolic of the Ministry of Public Administration and Digital Transformation and its continuous quest to provide the necessary pieces to allow for whole of government solutions and whole of government solutions to work. In light of the last couple of statements, one specific to accommodations, I take that on board and I'll deal with it. But the question as to interconnectivity and the other pieces to which DPS Ganga Prasad speaks represent, as they should know, a significant pillar in the way in which we are going to address, and we as in this case, question of state, will address all of the pieces that are required for digital government to proceed and to continue. The pieces that surround security and other things associated with that type, both PS and DPS will also be managed under those philosophies in where we need to go. The question I have, though, for this is how much of what is being established and is being created by the ministry is focused specifically on how do we manage all of this going forward in a holistic way, and how much collaboration do you envisage and how much collaboration do you think is necessary to allow for autonomy of information to exist, as in the case of which we speak, and also for the fluidity of it to be transferred in a secure manner, and how that helps you in what you're trying to accomplish. Just based on the last the statements that were made.
Yeah, remember, in terms of the security, I would probably best leave that to the people in the IT world who could probably elaborate on that. But what I know, for instance, is that we only want to access information or to have information, not really probably using the word access, I am just using this word in my layman term, of those persons who we have in common. Yeah? So for instance, there may be, take for instance immigration. Immigration may have a database of thousands of persons who we do not have in common. But the persons who we have in common, we want to have a secure way of being able to communicate with each other so that we would be able to get the information as it is now, member. What we have to do is to write on a piece of paper and to give that poor 65-year-old person to go across to immigration who are in, we are all in COVID, and to get the information and then go back for it another day and then come back to us. And then on top of that, if the information is taken 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, because of what we require, that person has to be out of pocket for quite a while. So in terms of finding the answers in the technology world, I would leave that to the technology people. What I would ask for is a safe and secure manner to transfer or to share information on those persons who are deemed to be common, not for anybody else. Those persons is given permission for you to give us the information. And that will be standard practice across the board for grants that we process. It is not only about whether or not we provide a service on a timely basis. It has the dollars and cents to it. It has savings for the state for persons who do not qualify for grants, who are already in these systems. And as it is now, dealing in this paper-based environment is difficult to pick up. So the interoperability and sharing of information would also allow us to have tremendous savings. Yeah? So I'm not certain if I answered.
No, you did very well. Just to answer the questions that I want to understand, that the ministry's aspirations in terms of what it is trying to do is built around citizen support, efficient delivery of service to the citizens, and that what you're trying to do is not to be intrusive, but simply to get the relevant information to allow for you to proceed to do what you need to do to give them what they would. Yes?
Thank you. Member Deonarine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you, I don't know which one of the permanent secretaries would be able to answer, but just a follow-up question to Senator Member Mark's question. I didn't get an idea of what the time frame is between the dispatch and delivery of grants via TPOs. I understand that you all are very swift in terms of the processing of these grants, but the time frame from dispatch to the delivery of these grants, and I believe it's public assistance grants, via the TTPO's medium. That is, I believe, the checks.
Attempt to answer that and put some clarity. Again, we have our normal product. Is it? We just want to make sure that that is not what we are talking about here, but rather the COVID support.
The COVID support, in addition to the public assistance and the disability assistance grant.
Yeah. All our grants, we have a dual system of payment, either direct deposit, those hit the accounts. Before grants are paid at the beginning of the month. So your check is encashable or payment is due at the beginning of the month from the first of the month. By and large, I'll be bold to say that more than 99% of our beneficiaries receive either the check or those payments in their account before the first of the month. The system that we have right now with TTPOS collects those checks from us somewhere around the 23rd of the month to allow them to distribute that check by the last day in the month, so that persons would have it in their hands on the first of the month to be able to negotiate those checks, and of course it's in their account. So the payment, it's really, in terms of our core services, it's really quick. There may be some challenges, and those would be on the TTPOS side, where probably persons would have to come to the agency because TTPOS do not go out to the areas. But generally, I would say more than 99% of those clients receive their payments before the first of the month.
And what about the COVID-19 grants? In
terms of COVID, payments could happen the day after once you provide us with an account number. And we have had that where grants, it just so happened that your grant reached you in this ministry on time, and because of how we processing, you could be paid within a couple of days with direct deposit. Those payments were taking place quite rapidly. With the debit card in the first instance, the debit card was produced for us by the bank, right, by First Citizen Bank. They produced the card for us, so there was a time frame in terms of ordering those cards and actually receiving those cards. And then TTPOS was our distribution agent through courier service. And these two entities, because of these two entities, they may have added some time to it. So it could vary between a month from ordering the card to the delivery. And we have had reports of persons after 2 months haven't received their payments as yet, but we know it was in fact dispatch, and TTPOS was in possession of these cards. As it relates to checks, the same that applied to the cards also applied to the check. We have an agency that produces our checks. We had to send the payment file so that they could produce the check. TTPOS would collect, and then they would distribute through the courier service for us. So those two added some time to the process.
So just to confirm, you're saying it could range from 1 month to 2 months, or are there instances where it could happen the very next day or within a week?
Direct deposit into your personal bank account happen rapidly.
Only here, right?
But in terms of the check, from the time we approved an application and process a payment file, we depended on third-party agencies to make that happen for us. And this is where it added some time to the process.
Okay, and are you at liberty to give the information in terms of that third party that you referred to?
I just did. It was, in terms of the food card, the First Citizen Bank is our partner and agency. Mm-hmm. TTPOS is our distributor. They do distribution of our normal payment for us. And NIB is the agency that produces our checks.
Okay, and who in the ministry is responsible for ensuring that these checks are delivered?
That will be, in terms of the core grant, the Social Welfare Division is responsible for our core grants.
And the COVID-19.
And the COVID-19, that was done by various personnel in the ministry, but we process the payment once we issue the payment and it is done either by a check or a card, it doesn't come in our possession unless it is not delivered by TT Post.
Okay.
Right? They collected it and proceeded with the delivery.
Okay.
Only
So
if it was not delivered, it came back to us.
Okay, my final question, and it's a general question, and I want to go back to linking the Sustainable Development Goals and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, very early on, Madam PS, you explained to us that you were working with a poverty rate based on a 2005 SLC. Given that we have had the COVID-19 pandemic happen, how is the ministry going to be in a position to assess the extent of poverty that was derived as a result of COVID-19 if you all are working with the 2005 SLC?
TPS would have mentioned CSO is supposed to be conducting a survey soon in terms of a survey of living conditions. So hopefully we are going to have updated figures. And we are also looking at revising the standards means test so that it can cater for additional poverty, as you would say.
So there is no longer any intentions to verify or to fix the challenges, because the last time we met, you all did say that you were trying to fix the challenges that you all encountered with the 2014 SLC.
TPS, you want to elaborate on that?
Well, the challenge with the 2014 one is dated. We are in 2019 one, and SLC was in fact planned for 2020, and because of COVID, it sort of kept that back, and that is going to be completed hopefully in 2021. So we will rely on that empirical study to adjust or to make any adjustments in the ministry. As it is right now, as PS indicated, we will continue in terms of adjusting the line, using the 2005 study and using the retail price index to make any adjustment as it is right now.
Okay, so, but it still doesn't answer my question, with all due respect, because in order to assess the impact on poverty, which is Sustainable Development Goal 1, as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, you need to have a baseline against which you are measuring a poverty rate. And the poverty rate that we are working with is 2005. Poverty rate from 2005 to at least 2014 or 2018 would be significantly different from what is there in 2005. So is it that the baseline then we would be working with is 2005? Are there any workarounds that we are trying to look at?
PSO is responsible for this study, and part of that study would result in the creation of new lines. Mm-hmm. So it would not be as if they are going to use the 2005 line to analyze. Part of that study would require them to establish what the new line is and to be able to make a determination of the poverty rates, and certainly how COVID would affect that line. CSO would best be able to advise based on the study.
Okay, thank you, Mr. DPS.
I think in all fairness, that is a matter for the Ministry of Planning and Development. And really the whole effect of the Sustainable Development Goals and the measurements really, I believe, falls within the remit of that agency. I believe, Member Mark, I believe you have one final question. It is now 5 o'clock. I would like to, I know we can have the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services here for the rest of the week, but unfortunately, time does not allow. But we also know, members, that some of this conversation could be continued in writing. So I will allow Member Mark one question, and therefore after that, I would really like to wrap up, and we can, any further questions members will submit and we will send to the ministry. Okay, Member Mark?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Are you hearing me?
Perfectly.
Yeah, this question again is addressed to either the PS or the Deputy PS. I know in the past, Madam Chair, we have had instances of fraud at that ministry, particularly when we had major flooding in the country, and evidence revealed that there was some irregularities, improprieties, and that amounted to fraud. I would imagine that the PS and the ministry would have put in place anti-fraud measures to safeguard the public's interest and taxpayers' dollars. So I wanted to ask the PS or the deputy whether in this COVID-19 pandemic era, have we discerned or discovered any internal fraud at the ministry? And if you have, can you share those instances with us? And secondly, whether you have put in place appropriate, robust measures to safeguard the public interest, the taxpayers' dollars, to avoid these instances as occurred in the recent past.
Yes.
To my knowledge, there are no internal evidence of internal fraud was discovered. In terms of measures put in place, our system, that is the SSCMS, the current system that we have, authority is given to different or specified persons to do different aspects of the processing. So that those are the sort of controls we have in place. So no one person could input an application and approve it at the same time. So those segregation of duties are the controls that we have in place.
Are these things in writing, and can you make that available to the committee?
Sure, we will do that.
Thank you.
All right, so I just wanted to follow up on that question that Member Mark asked about fraud. And in your submissions, I got the impression that there were no, and in fact, also Mr. Ganga Prasad, from what he said, I got the impression that there were no instances of fraud when it came to the food and income support because of how robust the questionnaire and your systems and processes were. Is that in fact so? Is my understanding correct?
Well, in terms of when you say fraud, is that somebody sent in an application that didn't meet the criteria and we would just have rejected it. So yes, there were no instances discovered when there were fraud. In terms of fraudulent documents attached to an application or so.
So that your systems were robust enough that people could not fudge your system.
Yes, that is true.
All right. So, and maybe for the benefit of the listening public, if maybe you could explain this scenario. I believe what you said is that people who had applied for senior citizen grants and whose applications were still being processed, those people got some food and some income relief. That's correct? That's the grant they got it under?
Yes.
Okay. So a member of the public indicated that she was in the system for senior citizens grant. She was approved. It wasn't paid, and she was told she'd be qualified for the income support. However, when she was called to collect her check, the check was paid to somebody else because of, I think, some error in the entry of her ID number. How is that resolved? This happened in Tanapuna, so I don't know if it hasn't reached to the PS or the deputy PS.
What happened is that, remember, we use this, the unique identifier we use is the electoral identification card. So if, for instance, as you said, somebody made a mistake and punched in a wrong number, if that person is already existing in our system as, say, a recipient of another grant, their claim would have been denied. So they would not have gotten the income support. Like if it's a senior citizen pension ID number, that person would have been there in the system as having already received a grant, so their claim would have been denied. If, for instance, the person is not already in our system, it's possible that a payment could have gone out to the other person who has that ID number. And if the person come in and they tell us about it, we would look at it and input your application if you didn't get it. And then we would look at recalling that other one where an application was not actually submitted for.
Okay, so if that is the case, why hasn't it happened? Why haven't you recalled in this particular instance?
To be honest, I'm not aware of that in the particular instance you're talking about.
And let me ask another question. If the person had applied for the senior citizen grant and they qualified, when you process it, let's say you process it 6 months later because you have to verify information and so on, do they get the payment from the date of the application or from the date that they approved?
For senior citizens pension is from the date of their application or their date of birth, whichever is later. Okay. So some could have applied before they actually turn 65, so they would not get it until they turn 65.
Okay, so the person has turned 65. So that therefore, and remember we're having this discussion for the benefit of somebody who has texted some information. So therefore, the person in the particular instance who would have got the income relief in lieu of the senior citizen grant, because that was still being processed, would it be correct to conclude that they really haven't lost off, but it's just that there would have been a delay in payment?
Well, if they apply for the senior citizens grant and not the income relief, although they had gotten that, they would be qualified for that grant from the date of their application, so they would not lose out. But if, for instance, as I said, they got that income supported error, we would seek to recover that from their pension.
Okay. Now, you know, sometimes, Madam PS, with all due respect, ifs confuse people. So that, to be clear, because we're not dealing with ifs, I think I've painted a clear picture. The person applied for senior citizen pension.
That person will be paid senior citizen pension from the date of
their application. Thank you very much. Mr. Ganga Prasad, I think you wanted to help us out here too?
No, I think PS clarified it is paid from the date of the application. And just to indicate as well that there are two other requirements that must be satisfied at the date of the application. There's the residential one. You must have lived in the country for a particular time, as well as the income. So you may have applied in January, but because of counting those years that you have to be in Trinidad, you only make the time in March. You cannot go back and say, well, from the date of application. So for instance, a person applied in January and the income was in excess of 5,005 and up to April, it means that person is going to receive payment from June. Oh, sorry, from May. Yeah, so there's some little variations, but generally pension is paid from the date of application once they meet all of the requirements.
Okay, at the date of the application. Yes? Okay, the second thing I wanted to ask is, in terms of fraud, the only instances of fraud that you all detected would have been those 37 instances where it came to rent application, the rent relief?
Yes, that is true.
Okay, and that is finite, that is definite. There is no possibility of that 37 increasing by any applications that you still have to be processed.
We do have a few more rental applications to process, so it could increase.
Okay. And as far as the 37 that you've discovered thus far, I believe those have been reported to the police?
Yes, they were forwarded to the Fort Squad.
Apart from them being forwarded to the Fort Squad, have you made any other overtures to recover the money, or has any other money been recovered otherwise?
Those applications, when we say they are fraud in terms of submissions. Like, for instance, persons who weren't actually renting, claiming rental assistance, but the payments were not made.
Okay, so there's been no loss.
No loss of payments, yes.
Okay, Thank you very much. And the last thing I wanted to find out, which is basically a pet peeve of mine, these shelters, or this shelter, I'm not sure because in one instance you're talking about shelters, but if I read it properly, I only seeing this in Vincent de Paul, and what it is, C19, C17?
C19.
Shelter. What is happening to that? And what stage is that at?
Okay, well, you may be aware that we are looking at street dwelling in terms of street dwelling in the cities. So we are looking, currently, we are looking at assessing even, and it's not just C19, it's the temporary shelter we had at downstairs of the CSDP there during the COVID period. The other floors are CSDP as what you know it to be. We also have Port Shamrock in San Fernando, another shelter there, right? In terms of dealing with the street dwelling issue, we are currently looking at assessing the people at CSDP so people could transition out. Like, for instance, there are a number of persons there who are employed and they just need like a transition home, maybe for a period of a year or so, with assistance, and then they can remove them out. So we are looking right now in terms of doing assessment, like persons over 65 and they require care, we will look at to place them in community care. Those are homes for the older persons. And we are also trying to set up, not trying, but we are looking at setting up an assessment center. So for the persons we have there who are assessed as drug addicts and so on, we have our People Empowerment Center, which deals with abuse, victims of substance abuse and so on. So we will be placing persons there, but the key right now is getting the assessment center set up and transition homes. So we can move people away, and I agree with you, CSDP is not suitable. The current situations we have and the current shelters we have are not suitable. So we are dealing with that right now. And I see Mr. DPS wants to elaborate as well.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Thank you.
No, sorry, Chair, sorry, PS. You can. I just wanted to indicate that there were questions that were asked earlier on, and I just wanted to just quickly provide an answer to it. So,
is this with the shelter?
No, it's not with the shelter.
All right, so I'll call you in 1 minute. I just want to ask one thing about the shelter.
Sure.
So what you're telling me is, in your response, all you refer to is people who were rendered homeless as a result of COVID-19.
Madam
Yes?
Chair, if I may, P19 was established. The traditional shelter is at CSDP, which is really upstairs, run by the St. Vincent de Paul for the ministry. Yeah? There are persons who would not access CSDP, and during COVID, they were all over the streets. And what we did, we established C19 for those persons who not going to access upstairs. There are requirements to access upstairs. P19 was built for these people so that they can come. It's not persons who are rendered homeless as a result of COVID. They are homeless nonetheless, and they were on the street, and they needed a place so that they can just go there to have a meal, some sanitary, to have a shower and a fresh set of clothing, as well as they can sleep there. So C19 was established for that purpose.
All right. Okay. So let me ask, because my particular peeve is Sackville Street and another public building, which is TSTT, which must be running a shelter outside there. Okay? And the whole block of Sackville Street, just west of the Parliament building, between Edward and I would say Francis Street, is becoming a home for the homeless. How does your program deal with that? If you pass there at 6:30, you would see people starting to bed down. How does your program deal with that?
Okay, our ministry on its own cannot forcefully remove persons from the street. We need to get the police involved. We need to get mental health. And our initial discussions are heading in that direction. So hopefully within the next couple of months, there will be improvements in terms of reducing the number of persons on the street.
I don't have much comfort, but I live in hope. And the last thing I want to ask PS is this. If you had to do this all again, God forbid, what you will do differently? What threats you see, what strengths you see that you have, what weaknesses. If you had to handle COVID-19, now I don't want to be there again. If you had to handle it again, what would you do differently? Given the fact you have the same lack of resources in the same buildings you cried about, all of that, what you would do differently?
Just need to mobilize a bit quicker. Like, for instance, how we had to simplify the forms and so on after. We know we cannot deal with a 3 and 4 and 5 page form. You know, so the things like that we learn, it's just a matter of applying it.
Okay, so then I'll ask you to submit to me in writing lessons learned. Okay? Sure. Thank you very much. I think Mr. Ganga Prasad has some lessons learned to share. But, you know, in the interest of time, I would ask that you all submit that in writing. Okay? And I want to thank Madam PS, Mrs. Citran, Mr. Ganga Prasad, Mrs. Pilgrim Soons, and where are you? Ms. De Leon. I want to thank you all for a very interesting conversation. And I am sure the members of the public learned a lot. I'm sure there are still many questions that we, the members of the committee, will still have unanswered, but we will send those to you in writing, and hopefully that will help inform us more to see how we could assist you by our recommendations. I want to thank the members of the media, the members of the listening public for remaining with us. I wish you all a safe journey home. And to the members, I would ask you to stay tuned a little longer, and good evening to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.